Hi, everybody. Louise Eddington back again, the Cosmic Owl, ready to give you the week ahead forecast beginning September the 21st through September the 28th. Couple of things before we start. Please don't forget to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, leave me a comment. I try to at least read all your comments and heart them, even if I can't respond to them all. But I do love to get your comments about what's going on and how these energies are affecting you. Um, you don't need to give the aspects, things like that, but whatever, you do you. But anyway, the week ahead. So, a couple of things before we go through the whole week. I'm pulling three oracle cards for the week. I know we're having the equinox and the sun will enter Libra, but these which oracle cards are really speaking to me at the moment. I will probably go back to the Red Threads Tarot next week, but we'll see. Now, one other thing as I pull the cards, because I like to tune into the energies as I pull them, is about Pluto being out of bounds. Pluto is now out of bounds, and I just want to quickly run through some dates. I have Rosie Finn's book. Persephone's Revolution, and she's done a whole load of research. So those of us that follow her do not have to. And Pluto is going out of bounds every year for a couple of months, right through till 2035. The peak time is Mercury will go out of bounds from October the 6th to the 16th at 23 degrees 48 minutes south of the ecliptic. And so she says that these periods where Pluto goes out of bounds south bring collapse, revolution, non-violent resistance, paradigm shifts, and awakening. But this year, Pluto went out of bounds on September the 11th and will go back in bounds on November the 9th. So it's just literally 2 months of Pluto being out of bounds, and it's not going very out of bounds this year. It goes to 23 degrees and 32 minutes south. And so that's not as far off the ecliptic as it will be in 2030. But the overall theme of her book is that this is bringing in a good time. So for the rest of this decade, I think we are entering this period of massive uprising and change and awakening. And the planets also point to that, of course. The other thing I will mention before I start going through the charts day by day and giving you an overall kind of picture of what's happening is that the nodes, and we'll see it when we look at the charts, well, I'll point to it. The lunar nodes are sitting at 18 degrees because we start the week with the solar eclipse. And this, again, astrologers never agree. I heard an astrologist say that we leave eclipse season when we get to the next full moon in October, but the nodes are still at 18 degrees then. And I use the true calculation of the nodes, and I have noticed that, I'll just save this, that I feel when the true calculation of the nodes, the osculating nodes, when they move off the degree they sit at right through the eclipse season, then that's another stage in the eclipse season entering. Well, that's not this week ahead. So, I just wanted to kind of lay out that groundwork. So, in other words, we are still in one of the most intense periods of the year. Eclipse seasons are always intense. We had the first eclipse season March and early April, and at that time Mercury and Venus were both retrograde at the same time, and that was a very intense, chaotic period as well. And stuff happens, of course, in between, but what happens during these eclipse seasons tends to reverberate out, and we feel the ongoing effects after the eclipses. That's how I feel it happens. Alrighty, so just a glimpse of the cards for the week. The first card is the Goddess of Grace. That's very relevant. This is Failure's Muse, and we will read the full text after the call, at the end of the call. And this is the Rescuer. Okay. No, I love, she's got a little lamb. I have a thought on that one. Anyway, as you might imagine. So now I am going to very quickly just recap where we're at to start, because we are in such a major period. And I have never actually seen so many quincunxes. Quincunxes are aspects where, so we have an opposition. So for example, Mars is opposing, Mars in Libra is opposing Aries. Quincunx is an aspect to those adjacent signs. The quincunx is always an aspect of adjustment. But not only that, we have an awful lot of fingers of destiny, which are two quincunxes joined by a sextile. And I will point them out, but I want you to try to encourage you to look at this very intense period of so many planets speaking to each other at certain degrees. So very quickly, like 18 degrees I mentioned the nodes will sit at. We have Chariklo, who I cannot leave off right now. Sorry, I meant to take Urania out, but if she might mean something to you as well, because she's kind of conjunct Pluto at the moment. But anyway, Chariklo's at 18 degrees, and we don't, this is Friday. We don't have a lot at 18 degrees to start the week, but you will see that we keep having things come to 18 degrees and hitting those nodes over and over. The other thing is we have all these slow moving energies at the very beginning and very end of signs. I did a video already talking about the eclipse at the anaretic degree, and on Friday, tomorrow, we also have this Venus occultation at the anaretic degree. That's the 29 degrees. And then we've also got all these slow moving energies at the very beginning of signs. So you will just notice that I will keep mentioning these degrees, and they're making various fingers of destiny or fate and so on. We also have this ongoing air grand trine. This time it's activated by Mercury, which is just moving into Libra. And then the sun will follow into Libra, which is the equinox. And as we go through the day by day, you will see that. And this is making an air grand trine, okay? But it's actually making a kite because it's pointing to Neptune in Aries. And gradually these planets will keep talking to each other, but then it will shift a little bit in elemental energy. But this is a fire and air grand trine, so things are very fired up and passionate, but also this is about perspectives changing as well, and all that kind of stuff. So there we go, there's the very start of the week. I really do not want to kind of cover old ground. So on to the first day of the week that we are looking at, September the 21st. Just so you know, this will become a written day by day forecast on my Substack if you want to see it written in written form. September the 21st is the start of the week. This is actually the day of the solar eclipse, but let's go through the aspects where we start, because we don't start with the solar eclipse. The first major aspect on the 19th is Mercury in Libra. Mercury is now just over 6 degrees away from the sun, so it's still under the beams of the sun, and we're right in the very balsamic phase of this eclipse new moon, this solar eclipse powerful energy. So Mercury is being purified still behind the sun from our perspective, our thought processes, the information we take in, our voice is all kind of going through this cleansing process. But the first thing that happens very early in the morning on September the 21st, I don't know why I haven't got that aspect exact, but anyway, what it does happen is that Mercury will make an air trine to Uranus. Mercury and Uranus are kind of like higher mind, lower mind. Uranus just went retrograde. This is breakthroughs. This is a supportive aspect, part of this air grand trine. This is awakening, to go back to what Rosie Finn said about these Pluto out of bounds to the south. So, you know, all of this is speaking to each other. We are undergoing a massive, massive awakening, okay? Then Mercury will exactly trine Pluto. So Mercury earlier in the day, again, I don't know, something a bit wacko with my software still. They seem to be having a few problems. But Mercury at 1 degree of Libra will aspect all of this. This is massive transformation and change, and it's all pointing towards Neptune as well, really all together at the same time. This is this massive kind of paradigm shift, as Rosie Finn called it, but also this massive collective awakening where we're starting to see what's really going on and what needs to change in so many ways. I'm not going to get political. So then we have later in the day on September the I'm on September the 19th. That's why. Okay, so on to September the 21st. Sorry. The moon will be, as we said, in the balsamic phase, right there in the dark of the moon on the 21st. Under that balsamic phase, the moon will make a sextile to Jupiter, earth and water. This is very cleansing, purging, washing away. That balsamic moon is always a falling away. The anaretic degrees are a falling away degree. Things are falling away in our personal lives and in the collective. And it's got to collapse. To talk about, you know, go back to the Pluto out of bounds theme as well. Rosie Finn mentioned collapse, first of all. We're seeing the collapse of what needs to collapse, and then something is going to awaken. And we're going to have this revolution. But she said it's going to be a peaceful revolution. She said it's south is peaceful. And I have long felt, before I knew about her work, that we are not entering civil war as such. So hopefully that reassures you. So later on the 21st, right before the eclipse, the sun exactly opposes Saturn. Some clarity, some self-limiting beliefs fall away. I talked about all of this on the eclipse video itself. But then we have Jupiter moving in to form a water grand trine, or actually the faster moving asteroids start forming this water grand trine, another one of washing away energy to the North Node. And I didn't put it on here, that's annoying. Nessus is also there. Nessus is you know, revealing all this intergenerational abuse. It's taking the lid off things. That's saying the buck stops here. We've had enough. So these are all kind of working together as well. Okay, then we actually have the eclipse, and right after the eclipse, so the eclipse itself is at 3, or the new moon is at 3:54 p.m. Eastern on the 21st, and at 5:40 p.m., so just under 2 hours later, the moon moves into the sign of Libra ahead of the sun, starting moving towards the equinox. And then the moon opposes Neptune, trines Uranus, trines Pluto, trine Sedna as well. Big awakening, big paradigm shift again every time it's activated. But this is right under the dark moon still. So this is more kind of coming into the shadows. It's planting the seeds of what's going to come for the future. And we are personally planting our own seeds. All right, on to September the 22nd. So September the 22nd, here's the chart. I want you to just look at the patterns as well. You can see this air grand trine is still really strong because now the moon has moved into Libra and activating it, and the moon is opposing Neptune, as I said, so it's this fire and air kite as well. The watery grand trine eases a little bit. At the moment, the air grand trine, ideas, communication, news, cycle, all of those kind of airy kind of energies is the stronger one, and it's fire and air, so it's very passionate, but also very kind of phoenix-like, very kind of burn it down. So on to September the 22nd, early on, the moon we're still under the eclipse energy, right? So we don't leave that actual dark moon phase. I'll let you know when we do. But the moon will start to sextile Vesta, the inner flame of devotion and commitment, and the flame of the state in visionary Sagittarius, fire and air again. But this is a sextile, an opportunity aspect of what are we creating? What are we creating? It's new for us, inside us, all of those things. But then September the 22nd, at 3:54 a.m. Eastern, Mars leaves that anaretic degree. The sun is still there, look, but Mars moves into its own sign, Scorpio. I always think Mars in Scorpio, because Mars is the traditional guide for the sign of Scorpio, really cuts deep into those Scorpio secrets, Scorpio energies. It's a bit like a psychic surgeon. Mars really is deeply passionate, but Mars pointing its arrow really points deep into the dark and the shadows of power, manipulation, all those kind of things. Now, conversely, Mars in Scorpio can be the manipulation and the power over paradigm, but I also think Mars digs it up and shows it, points into it and goes, look at these shadows. This is what's coming up. And so you may be personally looking at where you've been part of this power over paradigm as we move out of it, but that you get the idea. So that's going to be Mars' journey in Scorpio. I didn't actually look when Mars leaves Scorpio. Let me quickly look. Mars will be in its own sign of Scorpio until November the 4th. So he's got quite a long journey in there, and we'll track that as we go through. But he makes some big aspects this week. So also right after Mars goes into Scorpio, Mercury, now 6, 7, still under the beams of the sun, still being purified, Mercury will make a trine aspect to Pallas Athena. And Pallas Athena is the wise owl of justice. She's the wise justice, strategic warrior. Mercury is of the mind as well. Air signs are of the mind. But Mercury's still, we're still under the eclipse, but Mercury will start to pull pieces together and create a strategy as we start to emerge. And Pallas Athena is about to go back to 7 degrees of Aquarius, 6 degrees, sorry, which is where the south node of the USA is, 6 degrees Aquarius. If you want to know more about that 6-degree mark, because it's huge, it's also a degree that is going to be activated over and over again. If you search Cosmic Owl Astrology, Fools and Lovers, I did a video a while back with a friend of mine, and we looked at the Zero, Aquarius, the Fool card, and the Lovers card, six, which is the Gemini card, but it's also, coming together, and it represents the number 6. So it's the 6 card. So, I think you get the idea. Okay. So anyway, just one other thing I quickly wanted to check, because Pallas Athena is so active this week and this month as well, is that Pallas Athena, when Pallas Athena gets to the 6 degrees Aquarius, that's her station degree. She'll station direct at that degree, which means she's going to be there for a long time. She stations direct on October the 4th. So you can kind of see that all these things are kind of like grinding the message in, especially for the USA, but also collectively. Anyway, I spent too long on that. The Libra moon, we have the moon in, will conjunct Mercury, and then will square Pholus, which is over here in Capricorn, which is cause and effect, keeps revealing things. Then the next big aspect on the 22nd is Venus over here in Virgo, is going to square off to Vesta. And these immutable signs, more change coming, kind of more stepping into that more meaningful chop wood, carry water, service kind of energy, but not servitude. What is our part in serving the collective? And then at 2:19 p.m. on the 22nd, we have the equinox. That's equal day, equal night, turning of the seasons, turning of the sacred hoop, turning of the wheel. So we have the equinox. In the northern hemisphere, we enter the shedding stage of the year. In the southern hemisphere, they are entering the spring, the new growth phase of the year. But it's always a change. It's always a big shift. So in a way, this is really the equinox chart, but I might do another video on that separately, because it kind of sets the scene for the next at least 3 months until the winter solstice. After that, on September the 22nd, we have no more big aspects, so we'll get rid of that chart. And now we'll move on to September the 23rd. Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention all the quincunxes and fingers of fate and God. If you watch my eclipse video, you will see there are 3 fingers of destiny, I like to call them, in that chart. And these are kind of active around the eclipse too, not just on the day. So we're at a destiny point in many ways. And eclipses are also said to be fated or destined. They're points of destiny as well. So there's so much about that going on this week. But anyway, let's move to the 23rd is Tuesday. We're kind of hitting the fallout phase now. So I'm not going to go spend as long on these things. But you can see on the 23rd, I set it for the first exact aspect, which is Mercury, which is now 8 degrees away from the sun. Most astrologers say 10 degrees for Mercury emerging from behind the sun. It depends where you are in the world. So Mercury's starting to emerge, blinking from the sun, from this whole eclipse season of purification, cleaning out, letting go, clarifying your thought processes, your words, all of that. And Mercury will square Pholus, which I forgot to put on here. Cause and effect. We're starting to really understand the cause and effect of past actions to lead us to where we're at now. And then, so the moon will be still in Libra, spends a couple of days in each sign. And I'm not going to mention every aspect, but the moon will make an air grand trine. Remember, it made a trine to Pallas Athena, Justice. Now the moon trines Chariklo, and Chariklo is helping us to weave a new story. My friend who I did the Fools and Lovers video with, we are going to do another video looking at Chariklo and some things we have noticed. But I want to say as well that Chariklo is at 17 degrees soon. She's about to move back there. That's her station, direct point too. So both Pallas Athena and Chariklo are moving towards their point where they will move forward. And Chariklo will move forward on October the 27th. But she is the spinner of grace. Remember I mentioned the first card, appropriate, Goddess of Grace. There you go. So at 8:53 a.m., so Mars is quincunxing, various things. We've just, I think you should go and look at the other video, but you can see Mars is still the point, the focal point of another finger of destiny. So we've got one pointing at Venus, one pointing at Mars, one pointing at Neptune and Saturn, which is a boomerang yard or finger of destiny. This is such a destiny point. Anyway, on September the 23rd, the Sun comes up and opposes Neptune. Of course, next time the Sun comes round to Libra, we'll be in an entirely different place by next September. So, because Neptune will move back into Pisces, and then we have a Saturn Neptune conjunction early next year at 0 Aries. So this is looking at what fog we're clearing, what clarity we are clearing, and letting go, clouds parting, of standing in our own personal power and agency. Taking agency is a big theme. Later on the 23rd, the Libra moon will square off to Jupiter, so some big ideas emerging as we move out of the new moon phase. That's at 21 degrees. It's usually about 30 degrees when the moon really starts to gain light. So we're still really under the eclipse energy, majorly. And so then the moon will oppose table thrower Eris and Chiron, who are now back at the same degree, because they're both retrograde, and Chiron is the much faster energy, and Chiron and Eris will sit at that same degree for quite a long time. And so, this is yet another important thing. Chiron will not turn direct until January the 2nd at 22 degrees Aries, but these two will sit at that 25 degrees for a while. Then Chiron will move forward and pass over Eris again. Tables are being shaken, and first sometimes it has to be shaken within and then without. The Sun, last major aspect on the day, is the Libra Sun after the equinox activates that air grand trine, first with the trine to Sedna, and then actually Uranus and then Sedna, but also Pluto. Air grand trine, fire and air, very active this month. It's very passionate, but very Phoenix energy. Things are being burned down. Bridges are being burned. Try not to burn bridges without thinking first. Okay. September the 24th. September the 24th is 1:33 a.m. I'm starting with the moon quincunx Saturn. So the moon at the end of Libra, which is where Mars was on the eclipse, kind of finishes with this aspect of adjustment, a quincunx, but as it's actually kind of forming this finger of fate. But first it's a quincunx to Saturn, breaking the old rules, breaking the codex. Then the Sun will trine Pluto, I mentioned that already. But then Mars will come up, newly in Scorpio, remember, will quincunx Uranus, Sedna, and Neptune in Aries. And this is that big paradigm shift again. But Mars going into that psychic surgeon energy is a big focal point at the start of it. What this chart doesn't show at the start of it is that right here as well is Haumea, which is regeneration, and then the moon will move into Scorpio at 5 a.m. on the 24th, and we have a moon, Haumea, Mars conjunction in those intense and potent watery depths of Scorpio. We also move out of the dark moon phase, and the moon starts to gain light, so it's the start of the action phase. Things are really going to begin to change. And as we start to emerge from this really intense month, but we've still got a lot of intensity this week because of all these activations. And so the moon activates all of those energies, as I mentioned, for most, in fact, most of it by the first 8 hours of the day, Eastern time. So on to the 25th. September the 25th. Let's get that chart up. Kind of like having these charts ready instead of having to fiddle with charts. I might investigate annotating them too, but might make things easier to see. I'm going through that personal shift of how I work too, right? So then on to the 25th. We don't have very many major aspects, so I'm not going to spend long here. But the Scorpio moon, you can see it's moved on a little bit, but the Scorpio moon will will square Chariclo. So she's at 18 degrees still, the node degree, and then the moon will trine the north node and sextile the south node, activating the eclipse energy again, ongoing. But then the moon will also square asteroid Lilith, which is at 19 degrees Aquarius. So that's the talk to the hand one. I forgot to put her in. The divine feminine is rising, for want of a better word, but I see it as this rising up of we are connected. It's that more creative, interconnected, receptive energy about we've got to work together and create this new paradigm we're moving into. And then the moon will finish the day on September the 25th with an unbroken flow aspect to Nessus. These centaurs are working together in very many ways right now. And there are some theories, and that's yet to be seen if that happens, that the centaurs kind of came into our consciousness at this time to help to heal and wake us up. So I'm not going to talk loads about that. But Venus at the start of the day at 12:01 a.m., Venus in Virgo in the sign of the priestess or doing meaningful work makes another of those aspects of adjustment to Pallas Athena, who is now at the degree of the south node of the USA. So many adjustments we are all making. It may not be happening soon enough for some people, but I think, but how do I put this? I think this is beyond parties, because I've long felt that a completely new paradigm is coming in collectively and politically. So, I think many on the so-called left have to wake up as well. So it's and centrists who want it just to kind of stay the same, which is that true meaning of conservative. A lot of them just want it to stay the same. That's not happening either. Major changes. On to the 26th. back to Venus Day. Friday, you can see that the moon is still in Scorpio and activates all of these all of these goddesses in Scorpio. Hecate, the way shower at the crossroads, Black Moon Lilith, keeps oscillating back and forth through Scorpio and dipping into Sagittarius and so on. But they're all kind of working together this week as we really dive into that step into your own personal power. And I don't think I mentioned it, but on this Friday, the 19th, we have that Moon Venus occultation at 29 Leo. That's actually one of the Venus gates between her retrograde and her next superior conjunction. And it's the sacral gate. So we are working with the sacral chakra in many ways this week. But then on to the 26th, Venus in Virgo will make an unbroken flow aspect to Pholus, take the lid off things, cause and effect in Capricorn, Pholus. And so we're seeing more and more what's wrong with our institutions and why they are collapsing. Anyway, so, and then the moon moves into Sagittarius at 5:37 p.m. on the 26th. We will finish the week with the moon in Sagittarius, I believe, because it stays in for just over 2 days in a sign, and the moon will aspect the air grand trine and the Neptune in Aries, so more fire and air, and the moon in fire now as well, in visionary. So we're really now starting to move towards the vision we want to create. And so on to the 27th, the last day of the week, and then I'll read the card interpretations in the wonderful booklet that Angie Sullins wrote, because she wrote the text for the book. So on to the 27th, the last day, the moon is in Sagittarius, as I mentioned, will make a fire and air aspect of opportunity to the Libra sun and hit Vesta, more focus, commitment to what you are creating, to your vision of peace and whatever, all the Libra stuff, peace, justice, bring it in, but also in your own life, balance and harmony. Let's create that, this is saying. And the moon will then square off to Vesta, more mutable change, but we're moving into an idea of what our right work and meaningful work is in the world, how we're all taking our agency to help to create the world we want to see. Well, more and more people are waking up to this. And the moon will also trine my beloved Ceres at that time. So when it gets to 10 Aries, the moon will trine Ceres, who is going to be a bit quiet for a while in her retrograde. But incidentally, when she stations direct, she will station direct at 2 degrees Aries, which is the degree of the Venus star point that we are under, the retrograde star point from March 22nd. So Ceres will move back there and station direct in November. So really kind of all these last months of the year are kind of going back, seeing things, where we were back then, and hang on. She actually stations direct November the 21st, sorry, but at 2 Aries. So I kind of skipped a year ahead somehow. But, the next few months, as these outer planets, Uranus, Saturn already retrograded back, and Neptune retrograding back to finish their journey in their signs they were in, Taurus for Uranus and Pisces for Saturn and Neptune. This is a real kind of like things are going to start to change. Next year, whoosh, that we'll really start to create the new paradigm. things are starting to fall away in so many ways. Then, so we're on September the 27th. I'm not going to go through every aspect yet again, but the sun, I will mention that the Libra sun will square off to Hygeia, who's in Cancer, who's helping us to heal what our basis of security and so on, like that, and our own home life. I keep saying it, but intimacy comes from the inside out, as does healing. Okay. All right, the cards. Let me stop this share. I will take a picture of these cards, but first we have the Goddess of Grace, card 30, which it could be said to be Cariclo, who's helping us to write this new story. Okay, so she is card 30. You can tell my age because I'm having to hold the book away, or I've got to go and get my reading glasses, but I can manage to read it without. So, but Goddess of Grace is a benign ruler whose principal gift is kindness. This is very Cariclo, and her name literally means spinner of grace. Rather than doling out judgment or punishment when one of her people commits a crime or transgresses against another, she encourages her people to gather around a lotus fire. The offender is brought to the fire, and there all members of the community name every good deed and kindness the offender has ever performed since childhood. In this way, the wayward soul is brought home to themselves and their community rather than being ostracized through retribution or shame. The offender, once remembered, this could also be seen as soul retrieval individually and collectively. Once remembered back to their inherent worth, is held accountable for their actions and required to make amends, but with the support and kindness of their entire village, who understand this is faulty action, not a faulty soul. May we all move into that? You know, people have been gaslit and misled, people are damaged, you know, and their actions are faulty, but even certain people in leadership, they are acting out their own trauma patterns and so on out in the world. And so may we move to this state of grace with them as well. Gradually. 44, card 44 for this week is the Rescuer. Now I find this card interesting. I've not pulled it before, so this is a new one on me. But nobody's coming to save us. But let me tell you what the card says for the Rescuer. So she has this lamb, a symbol of rebirth, by the way. And incidentally, I'm also reading a book where he said it's called How the Patriarchy Stole Astrology. And this person is saying that initially in the circle of animals, which is the zodiac, the first sign was the lamb, not the ram. Just think about that. Anyway, killer empathy is real. Most people never identify it, let alone unravel its suffocating grasp on their lives. While empathy is a superpower, it can be a double-edged sword. It enables you to be considerate of and cooperative with others, but on the other side of empathy is the rescuer, who, in their compassion, is determined to save those they love and that which they care about most. This will lead them to sacrifice their time, energy, and other resources in the name of fixing everybody else. Okay. Saving, solving, helping, and otherwise rescuing those people and situations they feel have great need. This side of empathy cuts deeply into our life force and often results in the hemorrhage of their time, vitality, and creativity. Isn't that interesting that Charlie Kirk, who was killed here in Utah on the 10th, and some other extremes on the other side are saying empathy is a bad thing. Maybe we need to look at what they actually said, but also maybe it's something like this. Okay. It might not be, or there might be nuggets of that truth in there. You know, we're at this time of extremes where what they're expressing might have some nugget. And I think that card explains something about that. So the last card for the week, the Failures Muse, card 28. I will take a picture and I will put it on the thumbnail for the YouTube channel. I will also post the picture in the written post on Substack. So if you kind of want to go through this whole video day by day and have it to keep going back to, go and subscribe to Substack and get the written post as well. It's free. So 28, and I'm hoping you'll read and listen. 28 is actually Failures Muse, which I find really interesting. Oh, I can't get to the page. It was stuck together. So it's card 28, Failures Muse. 2 wolves, which wolf will you feed? That reminds me of that story. Many of us are terrified of failure. Just the potential of it feels like a lurking presence in the woods, a toothy howl that can send chills down our spine. But when we're willing to fail, those sharp teeth can become our ally. When we dare to befriend what we fear most, we become not only resilient, but fierce. More dreams are killed by not trying than by failure. Not risking is a guaranteed way to avoid failure, but also a guaranteed way to forfeit the sweet savor of success. The wolves of your psyche howling that you'll die if you don't succeed are lying. Their growls may be terrifying, but so are you. Your soul is forged of lightning and stardust and cannot be destroyed. But only you can prove this truth to yourself by getting back up after failure and insisting on remembering who you really are and of what you are really made. I love you. I will see you on the next video or over on Substack or anywhere. And if you've got my book and have read it, please review on Amazon. You can do it under the Kindle option if you didn't buy from Amazon. It gets my book more visibility. I really need more reviews. Thank you. Love you. Mwah.